Napoleon.
I have the high ground! You underestimate my
Strategy. Hello there everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you've been here before, welcome if you're new. I'm EDJ, and we're continuing with the Epic History TV series on the Napoleonic Wars. So last time we covered Egypt, but since, Egypt isn't done yet and he hasn't fully connected, the entire series altogether, I've jumped ahead to the next chronological event, which is the Battle of Austerlitz. And oh, by the way, my getup, it's raining a lot here in California. I just got back from school. It was a storm. I had to brave through like a lot of rain. And we're not used to a lot of rain here in Cali, but yeah, okay, but back to the main point. So the Battle of Austerlitz, this period takes place during the War of the Third Coalition, which is very notable for, Russia joining. It was Russia and Austria for the most part. And, by this time, Napoleon is emperor. He has completely taken control of France. He's 100% calling the shots. And, yeah, overall, the Battle of Austria is... it's like... I always bring up Hannibal one way or another, but it's kind of like... people kind of associate Hannibal with the Battle of Cannae, so this is kind of like Napoleon's Cannae. A lot of people are of the opinion that it's his masterpiece, and yeah, I definitely understand exactly why. I believe how the battle went was essentially Napoleon was pursuing the enemy, but he used deception, which was a big part of this winning strategy. He used deception to feign weakness, or that he was pulling back. He even gave up the high ground, which is very notable, and essentially let his enemies gain the high ground. And a fog had set in during this time, I believe. So I think this is also called the Battle Above the Clouds, or the Battle of the Clouds, because of just the terrain and, the fog. Essentially, Napoleon weakened one of his sides, I believe it was the right side or something, enough to lure the coalition down, and then he proceeded to basically rise up and just completely wipe them out. That's a really simplistic telling of the Battle of Austerlitz, but I just kind of want to show that I am aware. We're kind of at the point in Napoleon's career where I'm, for the most part, aware of what happens, And it's not like Egypt and Italy, where I just didn't know what the heck was going on the entire time, but, so yeah, I think Napoleon at this point, France as a whole, and Napoleon is at his peak, Napoleon in terms of strategy and brilliance, as is going to be demonstrated in this video and this battle, is at the peak of his, he's at the top of his game. And not just him, but the soldiers under him. I believe at this point, there's a lot of veterans in the French army. This is before he depleted himself with his constant battling through later campaigns. But this was essentially, Napoleon and France at its best. So it's definitely going to be really cool to, witness that and see it played out. And wait, before I get in, I want to talk about something I really love about this period. I believe at this point, Napoleon had reorganized the French army into corps, the corps system. And that's essentially dividing his army into, smaller, essentially mini armies. And then they kind of work together, but are separate and can act independently. To me, that's just a genius, system that Napoleon implemented, because it really played into his speed, they could traverse mass distances and isolate the enemy. Napoleon's speed was one of his greatest attributes because of how much land. I believe it was during this time or later on that he managed to sneak over 200 soldiers from one side of Europe to meet the enemy and just isolate them. So, like, yeah, Napoleon's speed and the core system, I just really love. And they could act independently and hold on their own or regroup. It's just, like, to me, it's just brilliant. Though the one critique, I believe, the one issue with it is that Napoleon relied, I believe, on letters and notes, which, if intercepted, could essentially give away his strategy and leave the other side, who the note or letter was supposed to go to, completely in the dark of what Napoleon wants. So it required a lot of trust. Napoleon needed to trust his men. He needed to trust and really delegate. So, and luckily Napoleon had an eye for talent, I think. I think Napoleon had very capable people working under him. So for the most part, you know, and yeah, that's about it, guys. So, like I said, I know the general outline of this point from Napoleon's life, though the specifics, I'm still a little in the dark, especially in regards to any marshals and the specifics of how each battle and encounter went. I know the overall outline, but it'll be really fun to you know, dive deeper. So, if you want to watch this video without me, my face, my little circle, or my little mouse moving and constantly pausing throughout the video for me to talk, the description is down. The link to this video is down in the description below. And yeah, with that said, without any further ado, let's just get right into it. Let's watch Napoleon's masterpiece, the Battle of Austerlitz, 1805.
An Epic History TV History March collaboration, supported by our sponsor, The Great Courses Plus. In December 1804, in the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself Emperor of the French. Europe had never seen such a sudden and dramatic rise to power. A son of impoverished Corsican nobility to military dictator of France in little more than 10 years.
Yeah, Napoleon, I think, is just the right person born in the right time. And what I mean by that is that the revolution essentially gave rise to someone like Napoleon, because I believe, like, before this and, you know, during that time, it wasn't common to just see someone kind of rise from a nobody into, like, a literal, he's literally with the monarchs of Europe, and a lot of the monarchs, I believe, just, you know, inherited, you know, strong family lines and lineages. Napoleon just came out of nowhere, and he literally, I think, embodied the revolution in that aspect, and it's just, you know, amazing, I think.
Revolution and war had cleared Napoleon's path to the throne. War would dominate his 10-year reign. A conflict unprecedented in history that would leave millions dead and a continent in turmoil. Eight months after Napoleon's coronation, the French Empire and its Spanish ally were at war with Britain, and Napoleon had assembled an army of 180,000 men along the Channel coast. But as long as the British Royal Navy ruled the seas, invasion was impossible. But nor could Britain challenge France on land. And so...
Yeah, in my free time I was looking up a lot of, like, the British propaganda against Napoleon, and I just love the cartoons. They're so hilarious. Like, man. Like, Britain's hate boner towards Napoleon throughout his entire, like, reign and life is, like, the funniest thing ever. It's so petty, but, like, man, it's just funny to me.
British Prime Minister William Pitt tried to build a European coalition against Napoleon, using diplomacy and gold. Britain would prove Napoleon's most steadfast enemy, and its press delighted in relentless mockery of the French emperor.
That they did.
Britain and France were old rivals in Europe and overseas.
See what I mean?
But
I just
now,
love
Pitt
this.
feared Napoleon's conquests had made France too powerful, the French Emperor had to be defeated, and Europe's balance of power restored if there was ever to be lasting peace.
Yeah, that's something else I heard about, like, when I was doing my research, and, like, I was kind of watching some of, like, you know, Napoleon-related content in my free time, and, like, yeah, I think the reason, other than just Britain and France being long-time old rivals, is just because I think a lot of the monarchs were threatened because Napoleon is nobody in their eyes. You know, Napoleon's obviously a somebody. I don't mean that, like, in a bad way. I just mean that in their eyes, he's a nobody who just showed up and is now, like, you know, in many ways they're better, at least in terms of military, and so they were, I guess, I believe a fear was of other people usurping them and their seats, you know, like that had happened in France. So, you know, I'm pretty sure Britain was, you know, that fear came in Britain, but also, yeah, just kind of disrupting the balance. I guess Britain must have saw itself as, like, almost like had taken it, they almost took it upon themselves to kind of set a balance or a standard. And since Napoleon essentially was tipping Europe to just kind of be really dominated by just France, they didn't like that. And that was a big cause of their crusade against him, you know? So, yeah.
Pitt found willing allies in Europe, among monarchs who despised Napoleon as a product of the French Revolution and a dangerous threat to the existing order.
Here's old Francis. Man, Francis, dude. Other than Britain, Austria was, like, always fighting Napoleon. Like, they would never, like really chill with him. Even when he literally married one of them, they were like, well, War of the Sixth Coalition, I guess we're with the rest of Europe against you, Napoleon. It's like, man, Napoleon must have been like, how many times do I have to fight you, Austria, you know?
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man? I love
Declaring war on Napoleon.
Austria harbored the deepest grievances, having seen her influence in Germany.
Oh yes, I believe Napoleon was responsible for the eradication of the Holy Roman Empire. Every time the Holy Roman Empire comes up, there's always that one person who says, it was neither an empire, nor holy, nor Roman. I feel like everywhere you look, someone's gonna say that, right? But yeah, Napoleon was kind of responsible, or played a part in it just completely, like, you know, shutting down. So Austria just kind of hated him too for that. Also, yeah, Austria already had beef with France because of the execution of Marie Antoinette. So yeah, there was also Napoleon just constantly humiliating Austria's army. Like there's so much hate from Austria towards Napoleon.
And Italy, steadily eroded by French victories. The final straw came in May 1804, when Napoleon had also crowned himself King of Italy in Milan. Austria, Russia, Sweden and Naples joined Britain in an alliance known as the Third Coalition, and devised an ambitious plan for a series of joint offensives against France. The main attack would be made by a combined Austro-Russian army, advancing across the Rhine into France. But Napoleon got word of their plans.
Yeah, I believe this is where Napoleon manages to demonstrate his speed. He wants to intercept, I think, the combination of Russia and Austria, so he, like, zooms in a speed probably never seen in warfare, at least at this time, you know, to stop them. So I think I'm right. I was right about that in the intro, or that might be a later conflict. I just know Napoleon pulled that off.
And reacted with typical speed and decision. He was determined to strike first, before the Allies could join forces, and ordered his army, now renamed La Grande Armée, to march to the River Rhine. His target was the Austrian army of General Mack, which had made a premature advance against Bavaria, a French ally.
Oh yeah, I remember about Mack. I believe Napoleon essentially completely decimates Mack's force and captures and destroys it, like, with blinding speed.
And was now dangerously isolated from the other Allied armies. Napoleon ordered Marshal Murat, his famously flamboyant cavalry commander, to make feint attacks through the Black Forest, while the rest of his army, advancing at speed, enveloped Mack's army from the north. That summer, Napoleon's Grande Armée was at its most formidable. Well-trained, highly motivated, its regiments at full strength. What's more, it had been newly reorganized according to the Corps system, later imitated by virtually every army in the world.
Okay, I don't want to, pat myself on the back too much, but I'm happy at least I kind of got a lot of this right. Because usually in these videos, even when I do know a subject, I'll usually talk about it in the intro, and then worry throughout the video, oh man, if I get something wrong, someone's gonna, like, correct me in the comments. Like, no, idiot, it didn't happen then, No one's ever been that mean to me, but, I guess that's, like, a thing in the back of my mind, but still, I'm happy I for the most part, am remembering well. And yeah, I like the Corps system. I just really love this system.
Each corps, commanded by a marshal, was a mini-army of 15 to 30,000 soldiers, with its own infantry, cavalry, artillery, and supporting arms, such as reconnaissance, engineers, and transport. This meant each corps could march and fight for a limited time independently, allowing Napoleon to break with the old doctrine of keeping his army concentrated and advance with his corps widely dispersed. This helped to disguise his real objective and increased movement speed because the army could advance along multiple roads.
I think also they lived off the land for the most part. Like, Napoleon wasn't so much limited by supply lines, which usually could slow down an army. So yeah, I think that was also responsible. Kind of reminds me of, like, didn't, I believe, Ulysses S. Grant kind of did the same thing? He essentially kind of, when he went into, like, southern territory, kind of just started living off the land. So yeah, like, I believe so. I'm not that well versed in, like, the Civil War. Like, I kind of know a bit about it, mainly from the oversimplified video, but yeah, it's not a period that I was that interested in. I don't know.
And live off the land, taking its supplies from scattered villages, rather than relying on slow-moving supply wagons. When the enemy's main force was located, the army could quickly concentrate for battle. This is how Napoleon's army was able to move at a speed that often surprised and disorientated his enemies. Mack didn't realize the danger he was in until it was too late. Napoleon's fast-moving corps crossed the Danube behind him and surrounded his army. Mack launched a series of poorly coordinated counterattacks, but despite some desperate fighting, the Austrians couldn't break out of the trap. Mack hoped that Kutuzov's Russian army could arrive in time to save him, but the Russians were still 160 miles away. And so, at Ulm, on the 19th of October, just 6 weeks into the war, Mack surrendered his army to Napoleon. The French took nearly 60,000 Austrian prisoners, and Napoleon had struck his first devastating blow against the coalition.
Yeah, I don't blame Mack. I think Mack made the exact right call. I think no one in Europe was ready for just, like I said, I think no one in Europe was ready for Napoleon at this point. Like, yeah, Napoleon was moving quick. It must have been like, they're still getting ready, and he's already there fighting them, like, you know? It must have caught them completely unawares, you know? So, yeah. I know I kind of, like, have been kind of low-key making fun of Austria, like, oh, they're Napoleon's punching bag, but I'm still, like, impressed by them, don't get me wrong. Even though I'm like, poking fun. At the same time, it is Napoleon, so, you know, I can't even begrudge them for losing, because Napoleon's, like, one of the best of all time. So, they do get better, though, I will say, Austria. At least they didn't, like, you know, stagnate. I think they did start adapting eventually to Napoleon. And yeah, another big, I guess, failure on Napoleon's part was never being able to find a way to lasting peace, because the longer he fought, the more resources and men he lost, and the more his enemies adapted to him and what he was made of, you know?
Russian General Mikhail Kutuzov was an experienced and wary commander, more cautious than Mack. His army was exhausted after its 900-mile march from Russia, but hearing of the Austrians' surrender at Ulm, and knowing he wasn't strong enough to face Napoleon alone, he immediately ordered a retreat.
Yeah, so, okay. So General Mikhail Kutz. Okay, he'll repeat it and I'll get it, but I'll just call him the Russian general right now. Okay, a little caution's probably best when approaching Napoleon at this point, because I don't think, like I said, Europe is completely aware of what he's made of, and obviously they're gonna find out. But yeah, caution's not such a bad strategy to take at the moment.
Napoleon pursued. The Russians fought several sharp rearguard actions, but could not save the Austrian capital, Vienna, which the French occupied on the 12th of October. Kutuzov slipped away to Olmütz in today's Czech Republic, where he was joined by reinforcements, as well as Emperor Alexander of Russia and Emperor Francis of Austria in person. Napoleon was furious that Kutuzov had escaped. By now his army was also exhausted, and far from home, with winter approaching.
You know, something I've been thinking about when watching this series is just how much of war is just walking to get to a battle. Like, especially at this point, like, I guess the fastest mode of transportation they had was horseback, but, like, even then, like, all these marches from one side of Europe to another, it's like, most of the time it's just them getting to the place, you know, and then the battle, and then them getting to another place. Like, the amount of walking and just marching is, man, insane. Must have had killer legs, you know, like leg strength and whatnot from all that marching, I imagine. Like, oh man.
He needed to force a decisive battle quickly. Fortunately for him, the overconfident 27-year-old Russian emperor sought the glory of battle, overriding the concerns of his veteran commander, General Kutuzov. With the Allied army closing in, Napoleon ordered his corps to rapidly concentrate on a battlefield he had carefully selected, near the town of Austerlitz. Napoleon oversaw the dispositions of his army late into the night, then grabbed a few hours' sleep beside a campfire. Dawn would mark the first anniversary of his coronation as emperor, and promised a battle that would make or break his young empire.
Oh, it certainly made it. What the heck? These YouTube ads, man, they're a bit much for me sometimes.
The morning of the 2nd of December 1805 was cold and bright with a heavy mist. Two armies of near equal size faced each other across a 7-mile wide battlefield. but the Allies held the high ground of the Pratzen Heights, while French Third Corps under Marshal Davout was still marching to the battlefield. Seeing Napoleon's thinly stretched right flank, the Allies planned a large-scale attack from the Pratzen Heights to steamroller the French right, before swinging round to envelop Napoleon's army. Little did they know, Napoleon was counting on his weak right wing luring the Allies into just such a move. Whereupon he would launch his own attack on the Pratzen Heights to cut the Allied army in half. His bold plan relied on his correct prediction of Allied movements, the speedy arrival of Davout's Third Corps on his right, and a perfectly timed counterattack.
Yeah, like, I'm amazed. Like, these generals and these, like, a lot of them have to, like, really get in the head of their enemies. Like, I was impressed with, like, the Hannibal videos by Oversimplified. Like, a lot of warfare is just like, alright, is the enemy gonna do this? What's the most likely thing that the enemy's gonna do? And, like, some of these generals were so confident and, like, alright, he's gonna do this. Like, dude, guys, I'm gonna be frank with you. I'm indecisive as heck, and I second guess myself a lot, like, especially when I'm like taking tests and stuff. I'm like, the answer's B, but wait, what if it? And then I'm like that. Like, if I were here leading this army, I'd be like, he's gonna do this, but what if he doesn't? And I would just be stuck, and then Napoleon would blast me with a cannon. But you know, like, I'm amazed by that. And yeah, Napoleon delegated, man. Like I said, a lot of us just look at Napoleon like, yeah, he's a genius, no doubt. I'm not taking anything away from the man. But, like, he needed to trust, like, his men and the marshals under him in order to, like, you know, make things work. He needed this prediction to work. He needed his men to do, like, exactly what they needed. And for this marshal to, you know, arrive in time.
The battle began around 7 a.m. as Austrian troops of General Kienmayer's advance guard clashed with French troops defending the village of Telnitz. In the face of overwhelming odds, the French fought stubbornly and bravely, but gradually they were forced back. But the Allies, instead of carrying out their great enveloping attack, did nothing. The morning mist and the late arrival of orders had led to confusion and delay, and it was another hour before the first 3 Allied columns were on the move. Soon, fierce fighting erupted around Sokolnitz village and castle.
Okay, so that delay seems to have worked in their favor because Davout seems to have arrived just in time. So, who knows, maybe the Allies' idea of this envelopment, maybe if it wasn't for that delay, maybe could have been closer to working, who knows?
Marshal Davout's corps, which had just force-marched 70 miles in 2 days, now arrived to strengthen the French right wing. Around 9 a.m, his lead infantry brigade appeared suddenly through the mist and retook Telnitz, before being driven back in turn by Austrian hussars. 2 more of Davout's brigades reinforced French troops at Sokolnitz. As the mist began to clear, Napoleon saw that, as he'd hoped, the Allied left was moving off the Pratzen Heights, and he ordered Marshal Soult's 4th Corps to begin.
They gave up the high ground. Don't you know from Star Wars? I'm joking. Because, yeah, Napoleon wanted all this to happen, and man, I couldn't imagine just the amount of, like, joy that Napoleon must have felt or any, like, general sees when their predictions are 100% on the mark, and they just see the enemy do exactly what they thought they'd do. Man, that feeling must be, like, so intoxicating. Like, yes, just as planned, you know?
Begin its attack. To the alarm of Allied commanders, 2 French infantry divisions, until now hidden by the mist, were suddenly seen advancing straight towards the Allied centre.
Dang, dude, just imagine, like, that's so, like, that works so well for Napoleon. Thank goodness the weather, right? The fog, but that must be so terrifying. Like, you're kind of just chilling, and then suddenly from, like, the mist, just a bunch of, you know, the enemy just shows up and starts attacking you. Like, that must be, like, so, like, frightening, man.
General Kutuzov was forced to hurriedly organize a defense of the heights, using troops of 4-column.
Kutuzov. Yeah, I'm not gonna get his name right.
2 hours of bloody fighting followed. Musket fire was so rapid and furious that both sides were soon low on ammunition and turned to the bayonet. By 11 AM, the French, with the advantage in training and discipline, had secured the heights and driven a deep wedge into the Allied position. To the north, a giant cavalry battle developed. While a Russian force from General Bagration's advance guard captured the village of Bosenitz, before it was halted by cannon fire from the Santon Hill. A decisive charge by 6 regiments of French heavy cavalry finally drove back the Allies, allowing Marshal Lannes' 5 Corps to move forward and seize Blasowitz and Krug.
Okay, I'm trying to memorize all of these marshals. Lannes, one of Napoleon's closest friends. I know him. Murat, the cavalry commander. I believe it was the Battle of you know the one I'm talking about, where he's responsible for apparently being great help. Bernadotte, I know he's the guy who eventually, you know, becomes in charge of Sweden and fights Napoleon. Davout's down here. Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to, like, you know, Massena, yeah, we all know Massena, the MVP of the Italian campaign. Okay, I'm trying to remember all these names, you know, in my head.
Now, Grand Duke Constantine, commanding the Russian Imperial Guard, led forward this last Allied reserve in a desperate bid to reclaim the Pratzen Heights. A battalion of the French 4th Line Regiment was charged down by Russian Guard cavalry, losing its Eagle standard in bloody fighting.
Oh, the show is phenomenal.
What is Shen Yu? I've seen, like, posters and, like, billboards and a lot of ads. Like, I've heard so much. Greatest thing I've ever seen. I've never met a person who's actually watched the show. I don't know.
Napoleon, who'd moved up to the heights, sent in his own guard cavalry. In this grim melee between the elite horsemen of both armies, the French finally prevailed. Napoleon had broken the Allied centre. Now, to close the trap on the Allied left wing, still locked in heavy fighting around Sokolnitz. Around 2 PM, Napoleon ordered 4 divisions to swing south and cut off their retreat. General Buxhowden, commanding the Allied left.
It's almost like what they wanted to do to Napoleon, right? Like, defeat him here, defeat here, and then entrapment. It's like Napoleon almost pulled off, like, a reverse, like, he pulled out the reverse Uno card, you know? The dreaded reverse Uno card to get them, like... Amazing.
Only now saw the danger he was in. Attacked from 3 sides, the only escape was south. Many of his troops were forced to flee across frozen ponds. French artillery opened fire, trying to smash the ice with their cannonballs. About 200 men and dozens of horses drowned in the freezing water. But not the many thousands of Napoleon's propaganda. The French Emperor had won a brilliant victory. His army had taken more than 10,000 prisoners and captured 45 enemy standards. Thousands of dead and wounded of all sides littered the battlefield. Many left untended.
Oh my goodness. Don't get me wrong, wounds are bad, but like, just the death and prisoners, like, man, Napoleon didn't lose that much. Like, look at the enemies, man. This is like... I don't believe this is true, but there was something hilarious when I was kind of like... I remember, like, one time, I was kind of, like, looking up about Tsar Alexander, and apparently, like, in one of the forums, like, some dude said there was, like, an excerpt of, like, Alexander, like, apparently crying under a tree upon the Battle of Austerlitz, and he was like, he was crying, or, like, under a tree and had diarrhea. I'm like, I'm not sure because I couldn't find any information about that, so I don't know about that, but it's just, the idea is hilarious, and I, like, you know, of just Alexander just, like, weeping over these, because, yeah, this is a disaster for, like, the Allies, right? This is, like, essentially what kind of gets Austria to be like, alright, we throw in the towel, you know, we're done.
For days. The Battle of the Three Emperors, as it became known, was a crushing blow to the Third Coalition. As Russian forces retreated back to Russia, Francis I of Austria was forced to accept a humiliating settlement with France, agreeing to pay a 40 million franc indemnity and give up more territory in exchange for peace. But meanwhile, news had reached Napoleon of a disastrous Franco-Spanish defeat at sea, off Cape Trafalgar.
That's where Napoleon's, like, I think he was building a fleet with Spain to invade Britain, and so, yeah, I believe the British basically went on to fight on this fleet, and they succeeded, and essentially ended Napoleon's hopes of ever sailing and getting, you know, to Britain.
British Admiral Lord Nelson, at the cost of his own life, had masterminded a victory so complete that it ensured British naval dominance, not just for the rest of the war, but for the next 100 years.
Dang.
Britain, master of the sea. Napoleon, unbeatable on land. The whale and the elephant, neither able to challenge the other in its own domain. When William Pitt received news of Napoleon's victory at Austerlitz, he's supposed to have said, "Roll up that map of Europe. It will not be wanted these 10 years." A month later, Pitt was dead. But his warning that Europe faced another 10 years of war and upheaval was to prove prophetic. Napoleon Bonaparte was the ultimate disruptor of European history.
Are we done already?
One man who transformed...
Yeah, I think this is the end of the video ad. I think we're done, guys. But, yeah, like, complete victory, man. Like I said earlier, Napoleon and just France were, like, at their best. This was them at their A-game. And, you know, it's just amazing. Like, Napoleon... really bold. Like, this strategy had it all. Deception, you know, a lot of risk, because, you know, I think Napoleon did end up giving up the high ground, which is, like, tactically a lot of people would be like, you're a fool for giving up the high ground, but, like, you know, control of the weather, resilience of his men, just, like, everything, almost everything you could want in, like, a victory, and, like, setting up, like, him using tactics and whatnot. It's just all there. Like, I definitely understand why a lot of people are of the opinion that this was Napoleon's best. And I think I'm on that side too. Though personally, I think of all Napoleon's campaigns, my personal favorite, I think it's called the 6 Days Campaign. You know the one where I believe the Sixth Coalition was going to invade France, And despite Napoleon, after battle of the battle, I think it was after Leipzig, or it was definitely after the Russian invasion, and then he just went on to completely keep winning battles. He couldn't stop their advance though, and eventually had to abdicate, but it was before his abdication. Like, I don't know why. I really have that's my personal favorite, but you know, we'll get there when we get there to that point. But yeah, just like this just had it all, man. This was Napoleon at his best, and this was really fun to just check out. And I'm really looking forward to, you know, the next, because I believe the next is the War of the Fourth Coalition, I believe, and that's where Prussia joins. So that'll be really interesting to, you know, to see. So yeah, that's all I really gotta say, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you all next time. Bye, everyone.